quite recently, as of the time of writing this script, we could bear witness to the Chapter 91 farce that was from the Dragon Ball Super Manga. The superhero arc, which is adapting the movie and doing nothing new. But that's for another time. But a lot of the changes in this particular part really haven't flown well with us. Chapter 92 was okay, but Chapter 91, the first one out of the main adaptation, oh boy. But one of the most frustrating parts of it was how Krillin completely botched a car chase. If you haven't read the last two chapters, and I honestly don't blame you if you haven't, but you have watched the movie, do you remember that overly long car scene at the beginning, which was essentially just to showcase, ooh, look, we're doing it all in CG? The one that served a large part in dealing with all of the exposition? What they did here was to put Krillin in the scene without changing any of the choreography, so it seems like he's just green screened in there, like he was just a last minute addition, with Magenta, Carmine and Hedo not even reacting to the fact that he was even there. His presence. Even his boss at the police station thinks he should have done better. He loses to Hachimaru, who is a wasp. A pretty interesting piece of tech there, mimicking Jiro's bug droids, but still a wasp. I feel for you, buddy. That L must really sting. The whole exposition thing could have been told by the police instead of Carmine for some reason. In fact, Carmine has been reduced to being nothing more than just a generic minion, whereas in the movie, he actually had some personality and you actually cared about his own well-being and presence in the movie. Now he's just there. Now listen, according to the last official sources regarding power levels, Krillin's power level was about 75,000 around the Frieza saga, after Guru unlocked his potential. And according to VJump, Kakarot puts his power around 30,000 around the Trunks saga, which sounds more realistic. Do you know how strong Vegeta was when he first appeared? 18,000. And he was already a threat to the planet. And Krillin still has trouble capturing a car after all of these years. A lot of time has happened since the last time power levels were relevant. Hello? Have cars got really strong for some reason? Seriously, he didn't really need to do much. All he had to do was just get in the way of the car or slice the car in half with his Kienzan. That's all he had to do, and he would have been able to stop them. At least just make it easier for the police to catch them, but no. Maybe he probably would have been sued for criminal damage or something like that if they turned out to be wrong. Okay, so what is happening in the manga? Does Toyotaro hate Krillin or something? That's why he's getting really the short end of the stick? Sorry. Well, we maybe not go that far about hating Krillin, but certainly this particular character is being treated rather differently in the manga, unlike the anime. And we know that Toyotaro likes his characters. And there are several instances of seeing Krillin really not getting a good deal. Roshi and Gohan, oh, they get put on a pedestal. Krillin, something else. Right off the bat, the first major difference is Krillin's involvement in the Tournament of Power. Or lack thereof, since the poor guy just gets KO'd before he can even do anything. Whilst in the anime, he is able to defeat Majora, and his part in defeating 3 other warriors is actually handled pretty well too, including Diom and Shosa. And yes, okay, I know that you're probably going to say that the manga has less time to show stuff of virtue by having less filler, but he might as well not have even been in the Tournament of Power if he was already just going to be kicked out within a few panels. It wouldn't change much really if you just got rid of him. You could have had somebody else in there. Okay, to the manga's credit though, he is allowed to have a victory against Yumba in the Moro saga, and he is allowed to use some of his more interesting techniques there, but kind of everyone else got that chance too. After that, he is relegated to being a bean boy again, just handing out senzu beans and having senzu beans stolen from him by Goku. Again. And he is not really allowed to react much to Goku's famous second screw up with Moro either. You think by now he would have gone, okay, Goku, I remember the last time this happened. This is really not cool. Again, him being the Saiyan's yes man is not solely a manga Krillin problem. I mean, we saw plenty of that during the Tournament of Power part of the anime, but still, it's rather annoying. And quite recently, we might have had Krillin assisting Goten and Trunks in their adventures, but we also learned that he knew quite a lot from Hedo ahead of time. And we really haven't had confirmation about him telling 18 any of this, or for that matter, any of its other friends about what Red Pharmaceuticals is all about, building a new Red Ribbon Army. I know that him being a cop means that he might not be able to tell his friends about police matters, but this goes beyond the police. This is the Red Ribbon Army here. They have previous. And not to mention his wife was a creation of the Red Ribbon Army. I think she has a right to know. Then back to the car chase thing that we opened on. What gives? Does Toyotaro hate the character or something? Well, we don't really think that wholesale, but of course it's really hard to get the man's opinion because despite being more media present than Toriyama ever was, he does loads of interviews, Toyotaro by comparison, he's never really discussed our favourite Krill dog in any detail, sort of glossing over him. And his fight sequence in the Moro saga was pretty cool, to be fair. We could see a Kienzan working for once, and a pretty clever after image, so it's clear that he wanted him to look awesome in that segment, but to lessen that actual chestnut, a lot of people got their chance to shine, even Chaozu. So this wasn't just specific to Krillin, everyone got their dues. The problem may lie deeper in the cultural understanding of the characters, and the different audiences that we have between Japan and the West. Because we have to remember first and foremost, Japan cares about their audience first. It's kind of like with Raditz. While you would expect the brother of the new hero to be a big deal throughout the entirety of the series, constantly dropping in to see what's going on, but we were treating that as subversion. But in the long run, it could have just been different cultural lenses. Obviously, we would love to give Raditz all of the attention that we could possibly produce, but we are going to be trying to do this from the perspective of the 2020s Western YouTube channel enjoyer. And we do feel like many people don't really treat Krillin as a serious character, despite the fact that he's done a lot of cool stuff. While the anime is much better with all of this, giving him his own mini-arc when he has to face his fears, a meaningful battle during a tournament of power, and a pretty sick assist in Superhero against Cell Max, the manga is really not interested in exploring that part of the character at all. You know, the fact that he was Goku's first real sparring partner before Vegeta and Goku's best friend, being the first friendly rival before Piccolo. We don't really count Yamcha and all of that because they didn't really compete with one another in the field. They did the first time, but not really much after that. Krillin ends up being this sort of friend who's kind of left behind, but tries his best to not let that get him down, nor let his loved ones down. He is afraid a lot of the time, but his bravery comes from conquering those fears that may keep him down or shy away from the battle. He's always in the battle. Even though he's not able to do much, he at least gives it a try. But then there's the trope of Krillin getting owned, and I will admit that's a DBZA sort of thing, that really didn't help. But it is much older than the parody itself, with Yamcha arguably being the character that got even more cruel treatment handed his way as the series went by. Hence why we did the whole what if Yamcha destroyed the universe? What if one day the Desert Bandit had enough of being mocked? Go and check that out. But yes, you know the drill. Krillin is the equivalent of a character that dies and then gets owned, even though at the end of the day, he's already died like 4 times, with 2 of those deaths being through Earth getting destroyed, so that wasn't really his fault. But in the global consciousness though, Krillin was that humorous sort of loser. It was fair to dunk on him. Even though he is part of the most functional family in the show, and he is the strongest human Earthling. We might argue that Ten Shinhan would have surpassed him by now if he had already traveled to Namek, but at the end of the day, Krillin can still pack a punch. Something that Toyotaro and Toriyama seem to be forgetting. I do have that feeling they actually forget that Krillin was an actual Major Line Z fighter. It's not really that they have any ill will towards the character or anything like that, but they've gotten so used to the character of Krillin playing a 3rd or even 4th fiddle at this point that they probably didn't realize that, you know, by now, he is actually quite strong. He's not powerful enough, mind you, to wrestle with divine beings or anything like that, but that's not what we really expect of him. What is expected, however, is to be good at challenges at his level or beneath him. You know, the regular sort of grunt work, like dealing with a car? All he had to do was just follow the damn car, Krillin. And you know, if the manga at least gave us a reason as to why he failed, maybe the Red Ribbon Army had some sort of technology that could realistically hinder him, that would have been a little bit better, like maybe a prototype Gamma or something like that, Gamma Zero. There is this sort of trope that in the likes of Star Trek The Next Generation, where TV tropes says that Wharf had the flu. He's supposed to be a great warrior, but he loses a lot of the time, so yes, Krillin is Dragon Ball's Wharf. In the words of TV tropes itself, this is the specific rationalization that an otherwise powerful character suffering from the Wharf effect or a curb stomp battle did so only because something artificially undermined their performance. The insinuation, of course, is that it probably wouldn't have happened this way under normal circumstances. That's not all though, as there is that Wharf effect thing mentioned here, which we also want to talk about. Want a quick way to show how dangerous one of your unknown characters is? Simple. Make them do well or win in a fight with a character that the audience already knows is tough. This establishes them as willing to fight and marks them as sufficiently dangerous for you to care. And Dragon Ball as a franchise has been a constant abuser of that particular trope. Especially Z. Goku and Piccolo get almost wrecked by Raditz, who is nothing when compared to Nappa, who is nothing when compared to Vegeta, who is nothing compared to Frieza, who is nothing compared to Trunks, who is nothing compared to the androids, who are nothing compared to Cell, who are nothing compared to Boo! You get the idea. Sometimes we see those characters fight. Other times we see the characters who destroyed them get stomped. And the thing is, if Krillin was that type of character, the bad guys would only be slightly better. But that isn't the case. If anything, Vegeta is that type, as was shown with Moro. We know how insanely the prince is in terms of strength, but he still ends up being beaten quite often, and it's usually his eye or left arm that gets the brunt. Krillin, though, for some reason, cannot have nice things in the long run of the manga. Although it is curious that the animated media is more interested in the character, honestly. It's far too early to say if we are going to see the Krill Dog factor in any way during the Cell Max fight of the manga, but what he was doing in the movie wasn't played for laughs. Krillin was a really valid member in that fight. Android 18 really did nothing. Krillin, he did a lot. If anything, Gotenks was an attempt at humor, and even he did something. So, you know, it's hard to give any sort of hard ruling as to what's going on here. But it is curious that the likes of Tetsuro Kodama, the movie director for Superhero, Atsuhiro Tomioka, the Forest of Terror episode writer, and Yoshikata Toshio, the writer of the Majora Fight episode, were all willing to give Krillin some proper time to shine. Yes, they were involved in helping write the movie, and therefore, would you look at that? Krillin actually does stuff. And especially with the movie, which arguably has less time for the individual characters than the manga or even the anime series, Krillin can still do stuff and be effective. Huh. Would you look at that, Toyotaro? Yeah, okay, look, Krillin's issues do not originate from the manga alone. And we are all aware that after the Android saga, he was mostly busy being adorable with his family, and of course his new tuft of hair. He also attempted to be brave in GT and had a touching ending with Goku, but Krillin's beating boy status has to end. We thought we were over it after the movie, that this trope would have ended by now? Even the Moro saga was showing some promise in that regard by giving Krillin his own smaller scale battle to get involved in and win. But all of that in the manga is just an unnecessary change to the movie. They maybe could have just shortened the car scene and just let Magenta give us the exposition easily. You know, like in the movie. Be done with it. Okay, I'm all for lore expansions and some clarifications, which chapter 92 arguably did a little bit better than 91 did. But don't just make changes because you want it to be different from the original. Change for the sake of change. You can be smarter about it by showing different perspectives and parts that were happening at another point, off screen. This is the way to make a supplement to a medium. Not just add stuff because you feel like you have to add a sequence from the movie to make it worthwhile, because honestly, none of this feels worthwhile anymore, it just feels stupid. And it happens to the detriment of the character who was there almost as long as Bulma, Yamcha, and Goku were. Despite all of the ranting, I don't think there is any sort of malice towards Krillin there. Not really. He's just unfortunate to be the perfect fall boy for something. Which is sad because the superhero movie as a whole was a great stepping stone in establishing other characters than Goku and Vegeta being protagonists. But I do think there is something sinister there about the fact that it didn't do well in Japan because there was no marketing really for it whatsoever. And I was around for when the Broly movie was being marketed in Japan. There was a lot of it. Everywhere was Broly. Here though, not so much until about like 2 weeks before the movie came out. Obscurity through lack of marketing. And then going, oh, would you look at that? Superhero didn't do well. I guess we're just gonna have Saiyans as the protagonist now. But that's besides the point. While nowadays Krillin might not be good protag material for a lot of audiences, surely you could just give him a little bit of dignity? I mean, come on, don't forget his legacy. Please? Because remember, even Kakarot, of all places, gives him almost twice as much power as Vegeta had when he invaded Earth. And this duckling is more than strong enough to wreck your world.